Greetings, everyone. This is Eric Andelin, Senior Workflow Specialist at SimActive, and you're joining us for an interview rather than a webinar. And the topic is going to be upcoming mapping trends for 2024. And I have with me Miriam McNabb, Editor-in-Chief of Dronelife. Miriam, say hi.
Hello, how is everybody today? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Miriam, how about give us a little bit of background on yourself and Dronelife?
Sure. So Eric, I've been in the high-tech industry for my whole career. I have a great degree in art history, so what else was I going to do? Went right into software sales. And for the last probably 20 years, I've been sort of a serial entrepreneur, and the last 10 years with Dronelife. And so we have been following the commercial drone industry for 10 years, since it was not legal in the United States where I'm located, following sort of the trends and expansion of the industry. I'm a true drone believer. I'm not neutral. I'm very bullish on the drone industry, and we continue to do so. So dronelife.com, commercial drone news.
Very cool. Very cool. It's almost hard to believe it's been 10 years. I tell the story, and it was December, probably about sometime in the last week, 10 years ago, that I first purchased my first drone, which is a DJI drone, and I was working for a mapping company at the time, and they had never seen one. So from that, I ended up creating the drone program for surveying and mapping in Texas. And like you, as a serial entrepreneur, I did that for about 5 years, setting up drone programs, getting people legal with Section 333s and all that stuff. I thought it was a good time, and it's a part of my mapping life, which brought me here to SimActive. So I'm familiar with Dronelife. I've seen it at conferences and been to the website. So we appreciate your coming on and joining us, because a lot of exciting things have happened with drones, and it continues to be that way. And sometimes you get numb to it if you're involved in it all the time. And it doesn't seem fantastic and spectacular to us because we deal with it every day, but to the average person, it's still, some pretty neat stuff. So let's talk about 2023, for example. What do you think stood out as far as this past year and with drones?
So many sort of great things are now coming together, I think, in the drone industry. 10 years ago, you were talking Section 333. I was trying to come up with 2 articles a day, and it was so-and-so got a Section 333 exemption. Mm-hmm. Somebody else got the Section 333 yes. exemption. And now we're talking about such sort of deep and useful applications. So in 2023, I think a lot of things came together at one time. One of those is certainly AI, and AI is so important in the drone industry because it's helping us move from somebody has to have 5 or 6 years of experience on the sticks before they can fly accurately around a field structure or something like that, to being able to ensure that you have consistent, precise data, no matter who's flying the drone. You can put it on the ground, you can have your AI choose your appropriate flight path, you can press the button and let that drone go. You have different kinds of processing. The processing, with SimActive and many of the processors out there is just getting better and better. You're getting much more bang for your buck in the deliverable you get for each drone flight. Mm-hmm. So I think that's coming together. We also have technology coming up. We had great drones. We've had great drones for years now. However, now you're seeing smaller, lighter sensors. So you know, drone, anything that flies, right? It's always mass affects the flight time.
Yeah.
So when you're seeing these smaller, lighter sensors, more sophisticated sensors, again, you're getting much better output for each drone flight, and your drone flights are getting longer. So that's coming together. And then, of course, we have regulations really allowing more. So in the drone industry specifically, we have for a long time been in the situation where the technology can do more than the regulations allow. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, that's not new to the drone industry. That's every new technology that comes down the pike. When you had cars, when you had trains, any of those things, right? There's a period where the technology can do more than it's allowed to. And that's certainly been the case with the drone industry. But now we're seeing sort of new commitment from regulators to try and catch up with this. And we are seeing a lot more aggressive waivers done in very practical and real ways. You know, you've got your shielded airspace waiver where they say, well, a manned aircraft isn't going to fly that near to train tracks anyway. So we can put the drone over the train tracks and that'll work. Or that's just an example. But we have these different kinds of waivers now, which are very effective and allowing sort of more routine operations in more places. So as I said, I'm very bullish on the drone industry, but I really think that the data backs it up here. I think that we're seeing a lot of things come together to finally allow commercial drone operations at scale.
So it really feels like that year over year since we've started this process, we've gone from being basically rogue, doing our flying and mapping and so forth, to a point now where we've caught up, or maybe the FAA is caught up to where our requirements might be, and now they're actually opening things up and making it much easier for us to, for the drone organizations, companies to actually turn a profit and get things done with relative ease instead of having to spend all their time jumping through hurdles, correct?
Correct. And there's, you know, there's a few sort of very major pieces to that puzzle. You know, as long as you had to have visual observers along a flight path to fly beyond visual line of sight, that just wasn't commercially viable. It was interesting from a test standpoint. It was very necessary. We're incredibly grateful to the organizations that did that heavy lifting for the rest of the industry, but it wasn't really commercially viable. And again, for many applications, for sort of surveillance applications, security applications, routine inspections on remote sites like mining and things like that, the real issue is that you can't require one pilot for one aircraft. As long as you're requiring one pilot for each aircraft, you really don't have a commercially viable setup that's going to save somebody a lot of money. There's tons of value there. The data provides enormous value to these organizations, but for somebody to say, yes, this is a no-brainer, this just saves us a ton of money, you really need kind of multiple aircraft per pilot. Yeah. And we're seeing some of the waivers for that come out too. You know, Percepto just got a waiver to operate 30 drones, one pilot. And so when you're talking about surveillance on a remote mining site or something, you want someone in one remote operational center being able to manage multiple aircraft flights, fully autonomous.
That's very interesting. And I always, you know, I deal with both manned aircraft and drones, and I have a long history in each, and the one thing that was always an issue with drones was that pilot observer requirement, because you know you can't be profitable at scale when you have to put 3 or 4 people into a project that are being paid an hourly rate. You're just not competitive with an aircraft at that point. But yeah, now that they've eased those restrictions, people are trusting the intel in the machines themselves to, you know, fly properly and safely. Yeah, then you can reduce the number of operators down to one in some cases. And then all of a sudden that makes you a much more viable alternative to, say, a manned aircraft for certain projects. So I think that's fantastic. Other things, you know, as far as last year, yeah, you mentioned that we're getting smaller payloads, which means lighter drones, which means realistically larger flights. So, and that ties into, you know, again, not necessarily having to have that visual observer, because now you might be flying, you know, even if you're sitting in the center of your project, you might be flying on the battery power that you have, you know, a mile out in each direction. So not having that visual observer is great. And also that means in the world of mapping, bigger projects, and bigger projects means more robust computing power and or more robust software to come to deliverables. As you mentioned, deliverables now that exceed what we were doing in the past, maybe with, you know, output directly to, say, a volumetric map or something like that. You know, you mentioned AI as well. Talk a little bit about maybe how you saw that come in 2023, you know, and then we'll talk more about it in 2024.
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about sort of applying AI, I'm seeing a little bit, you know, the traditional mapping and survey work, right, which is large areas, and inspection work. There's a point at which those are a little bit overlapping, right? So when you're talking about inspection of sort of linear infrastructure or things like that. And so for a long time, in a purely inspection of field assets respect, you know, the value proposition for a drone has been extremely strong, because you simply cannot fly a manned aircraft, you know, in a tight spiral around a tower. Doesn't work, and you can do that with a drone. But what you're seeing in some of the software packages and the delivery packages that were developed in that inspection form is a way of sort of using AI and machine learning to automatically tag things and point things out. So I think in the mapping arena, you're getting people to produce sort of very data-rich deliverables that are going to end up having multiple uses. I mean, I'm sure that some of the clients out there are looking at this stuff saying, wait a minute, I can do more with this. I need sort of more flights, and they're able to kind of do more tagging, more planning, et cetera, based on that single flight and single processing, because what you're coming out with is a very data rich thing. You've got colorized LiDAR, I know, through SimActive. You know, there's just a visual understanding now that has not been possible before.
Can you talk a little bit about maybe, you know, again, 2023, what we saw as, you know, drone manufacturers that stood out, or new entrants that were worth looking at?
Sure. So there are a lot of great players on the market, and I want to make sure that I say that just because I haven't necessarily heard of them or mentioned them. There are a lot of players out there. I think that what we see is we're at this phase in development in the technology where we still have a lot of very specialized players, and those players are doing excellent work. There are some who are really designed for engineering grade accuracy, for inspection, you know, others that are really designed for the film industry and so forth. But we do see a lot of kind of multi-use drones. DJI, of course, still the major player in the field, still has over 70% of the fleet worldwide to offer. And that gives them a significant advantage because they're really able to be on a faster development cycle. You know, if something goes wrong with a DJI drone, they've got 7,000 people reporting that within a day. They're going to get that fixed. But they also have the advantage of sort of seeing what the use cases are and being able to develop for that. New players, of course, Skydio received tremendous funding. They are doing tremendous development. They came out with a new flagship drone, the X10, in 2023, really going head to head, working very hard to engineer for that and keep it at a price point. So I think that the Skydio offering is getting very compelling. You know, also, I think when you're talking about drones, you're also talking about sort of what's meeting the needs. So there's kind of, you know, there's people who prefer to use a NDAA compliant or a US manufactured drone. You know, you have Teledyne FLIR coming out with the Cyrus, kind of a workhorse way to carry those incredible imaging solutions from Teledyne FLIR, right, that they're producing. And you're also seeing the sensor companies come out with more integrations. So Sony coming out with SDKs to allow more drone companies to utilize their Sony sensor solutions. Phase one, you know, Phase one came out with the Sora Camera 4 this year. And, you know, lighter, smaller, again, contributing to better flight endurance. And they've had several players come and integrate with the Phase one imaging solutions. So, I think that what I'm seeing in the way that people utilize these new platforms is that it's become a little bit more, what am I going to use it for? So you can't just sort of say, what's the best drone? Because the answer is always, it depends. And, you know, it really depends on what kind of projects you're doing, what your primary need is, and what your clients want the output to be. But I do think that we are seeing a tremendous amount of choice now. It used to be you had a tremendous amount of choice if you were willing to pay $150,000. Now I think that you've got a tremendous amount of choice, really at a much broader range of prices.
So you mentioned Skydio, and you said that they came out with a new system. Is it geared towards commercial use, or does it? I mean, it appears to me that Skydio is going kind of full bore into military and police applications and things like that. But their design and the machine learning in those drones is just fantastic. And it is great. It's a great system for modeling bridges and things like that. So I'm not so familiar with the X10. Are they still leaning towards commercial use, or, you know, what do you see?
Yes. Okay. So Skydio has announced officially that they are not going to keep developing for recreational use.
Okay.
So recreational use, the kind of content providers, that's not their focus anymore. They have received a lot of development funding, and to my mind, this is just great for the commercial drone industry. You know, they get a lot of development funding from the military. They produce this amazing aircraft, and then we see kind of a dual release, right? So this was way back when they did the X2D. They did the X2D, and so they have the enterprise solution and the defense solution come out at the same time. Basically, same capabilities with some tweaks for security for the defense version. So I think that that's kind of the way that it's going with Skydio. Absolutely a commercial product, not solely for defense use. I think they do have two tracks. They sell a lot to the military, but I think that they're deliberately trying to make that same capability available at a compelling price point to the commercial market.
Now, full disclosure, my niece is married to somebody at Skydio. High up on the defense sales side. They're busy making kids these days, and so we don't talk about drones. But that's why I came. That's why I came to ask you, because I don't ask him questions about, you know, what's going on at Skydio anymore.
Yeah.
So.
No, They certainly have a defense and public safety, you know, I don't know what you call it, corridor, or they are definitely going in that stream. But I think they equally have this commercial bent, because they are producing the software. They're trying to go for a full stack, so they're producing the software that goes with different industry verticals in the commercial space.
Okay. Now, you didn't really mention anything on the fixed wing drone side. Did you? Is there anything that stands out there?
Absolutely. So fixed wings are really kind of coming into their own because of their BVLOS capabilities, right, and their flight endurance. So when you have larger projects, a company like Censys down in Florida, U.S. Manufactured fixed wing, they have 100% success rate in applying for these BVLOS waivers, no visual observers. They're getting, they're really kind of helping stretch the boundary of what you can do there. But of course, you do have that long flight endurance. You know, and so these manufacturers who have worked very closely with regulators have figured out exactly what they need to integrate into the platform in order to meet the safety requirements for an FAA BVLOS waiver, and then the sensor requirements for their customers. So I think that those fixed wings, again, the one that comes to mind is Censys. We know those guys, but there are several on the market, and really for larger projects, I think that those are definitely competing favorably with you know, quads.
Yeah, and like you said, we're not excluding anybody by not mentioning them, you know, because we may not know.
Right.
From my perspective, from my perspective, from our customers here at SimActive, probably Wingtra's still the most popular fixed wing drone out there.
Yes, Wingtra, another great great product, you know, highly engineered, again, very successful with the waivers, and yes.
And then we see the other one we see is Quantum Systems. We don't see SenseFly that much anymore, but I'm sure that they're probably still out there. They were more of a self-contained environment, so we wouldn't necessarily see them. You also mentioned. Go ahead.
The tactical.
Yeah.
Okay. The EV is now, they do have sort of a more tactical aircraft version.
Right.
There. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And then you mentioned a little bit about the sensor technology. We talked a little bit about phase one, and you mentioned Teledyne's got some new stuff coming up. Can you give me a little information on that?
So Teledyne, again, they are a client of ours, so I know those guys, have known them for a long time. Teledyne FLIR is now producing the Cyrus, which is kind of designed to be a workhorse drone that meets people's security needs if they can't use Chinese manufactured aircraft. And Teledyne FLIR, of course, known for their thermal sensors. So they have a tremendous sensor package on there now. And because they just introduced this drone in the last year or so, they are continuing to put new sensor options onto the Cyrus. So
cool. So it's like a plug and play drone where you can just insert different payloads. And Teledyne also, for those that might not know, purchased Optech not too long ago, 2-3 years ago. Optech is a rival to Regal as far as Lidar sensors, so you know, outstanding Lidar sensors as well.
Yeah. And the Lidar sensors, you know, I think a couple of years ago, this is a good transition to this topic, because a couple of years ago we were seeing Lidar sensors made for drones were really not anywhere close to, it was two different things, right? You had to sort of use your drone Lidar sensor for one thing and your manned aircraft Lidar sensor for a different thing. But I do think that it's, you know, it's evolving. They're getting closer.
Yeah.
together. So at some point, we're going to see those converge, and then
yeah.
drones will have a
Actually,
base.
I spent also a lot of time in mobile lidar. So we're seeing the sensors that are being put in drones as comparable to mobile lidar. The point output is crazy, and the quality of data is really there these days. Now, that's not to say all of the lidar sensors out there, but when you talk about Regal and Teledyne Optic, for sure, they're high quality sensors. And the other guys, like you said, maybe the yellow scans, some other ones, even DJIs, they're getting very good. So it's
Yeah.
and the fact that you said they're light enough that drones can carry them now, that's that's really cool. It's really neat stuff. So looking towards next year, well, first we touched upon it in the beginning, but again, the outlook for the whole industry is good. You don't really see that changing. So looking into next year, how's, and it doesn't have to be just mapping. Where is the drone market going? What are the new verticals that people are looking at? Because there is crossover.
Yeah, there's definitely crossover, and I think one of the analysts that I use a lot is Dronei. That's Drone Industry Insights. They're out of Germany, and I think they do a really good job. They do a very thoughtful analysis, sort of based on fleet size and a number of different factors. So they do a little better than just random guesses about what's going to happen. So their predictions in one of their reports says 2030, we're looking at a $55.8 billion US market, which is certainly impressive.
Yep.
The top industries that are utilizing are energy, construction, and agriculture. So that's sort of continues to grow. And the top applications, mapping and survey, inspection, followed by photography and filming. Now, when I first started, 10 years ago, I think at some point, Colin Snow, previously the drone analyst, found it at a certain point that 95% was really just taking pictures. It was imagery and filming. It was kind of for advertising. So this is a pretty dramatic change, showing that commercial drones, it's now really in the industrial space. I think for 2024, what we have definitely seen at Drone Life is a lot more announcements of programs which have previously been in huge organizations, energy organizations, power companies, large construction companies, really moving to scale their initial, we had 5 guys with drones, we had 10 guys with drones, to scaling that across their organization. Certainly when you talk to companies that are like power authorities and so forth, they're not really interested in hiring from outside. They have their own programs inside now ramping up, where they are training from within, providing drones and developing their own sort of software and workflow to make that happen. Railway systems, power lines, all of those kind of things. And what you see happening is that once you get the drones on site, people start figuring out the more and more jobs that they can do with them. So they might start out with one sort of simple counting exercise and say, oh, this would be an easy way to do this. And then they sort of quickly say like, whoa, wait, I could do X, Y, and Z also. So then you've got those drones working many more hours per day.
So whereas in the past, when drones first came out, it was literally marketed as an opportunity for buy your drone, make $50,000 a year. It just seemed, and then you're going to run out and you're going to go, show an engineer how you can save him money on his mapping and all that, and it may or may not work. But now we're to a point where most of that stuff is being absorbed internally within organizations, like you say, you know, Exxon or whoever. They understand what their SOPs need to be. They understand what their security requirements are, what their safety requirements are, and it's much more likely that organization is going to grow that internally rather than, you know, hire out to somebody to do that. So maybe that changes how somebody comes into the market with a drone, or it changes them into a different vertical. But overall, it still means that we're going to have a lot more growth in the drone business. To this point, we're just talking about potentially mapping. You've got other things coming up, taxis and delivery, and, you know.
Right. But I think for drone service providers too, the opportunity is still absolutely there, but I'm seeing more specialization. So the drone service providers who are specializing in infrastructure inspection or specializing in, you know, power lines or a couple of different specialization aspects, they're doing very well because they're able to kind of go out. They have the experience of getting the waivers. They have the experience of choosing the hardware. And so they can work closely with their clients and deliver what's needed. It's not so much just buy a drone and you know, 70 different clients are going to call you. But I really see, because I tell everybody, they're so sick of hearing this, you know, all of the college age kids, I'm like, get your Part 107, because whatever you want to do, it's going to be an additional, you know, benefit to an employer. But I also think that when you think about the drone industry, it's very interesting when you look at things like the statistics about drone manufacturers, market share, and so forth. You can see those numbers shift. Somebody dropped out of the number 2 to the number 3, and somebody else dropped from the number 5 to the number 7. But when you look at the actual dollar amounts, everybody's making more money, because whatever your percentage of the pie is growing so rapidly that everybody's still making more money and growing. So I think that that's important to put out there, that when it comes to the drone industry, you know, don't pay attention to the percentages. Someone's now got a slightly less percentage, or DSPs have a less percentage than in-house, because the pie is growing so rapidly that everybody's still making money.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned that you know, the individual that starts out in here, the niche person, it could be thermal, it could be LiDAR, because I can tell you from being in this business for 20 years, since LiDAR started, there are very few good LiDAR processors. And even if your organization has 80 people with drones and they have LiDAR, there's probably somebody who's better at it who might come in and save you someday. So don't give up on your dream. Don't give up on your skills. Like you said, get your 107 when you're young. You know, it's like having a driver's license. You know,
Absolutely.
Now I can, you know, not only can I do this in the office for you or out in the field, but I can also fly drones. And it's, you know, when you think back to the hurdles of getting a 107, it's almost not there. It's non-existent. It's not a hard test, you know, and it's a foot in the door for sure.
Maybe it's like getting a driver's license. I think that's a great, you know, sort of equivalency, because, you know, you can't just walk in if you've never had a manned aircraft license, or you aren't familiar with the terms and the airspace definitions, but it's certainly achievable.
Yeah, and it's funny because my family, I'm a big family, but only my sister and I don't have our pilot's license, and there's reasons for that. But when I would discuss this with my brother, who was a pilot, and he'd say, well, you kind of need to be a pilot to know how to fly a drone and do this. And I disagree. It's a completely different set of skills. You have a lot of crossover, but to say that a FAA licensed aircraft pilot is a better pilot than a drone pilot without that is kind of crazy. It's two different things, really is. And that would be the same way if you were doing delivery with drones. It's, you know, you probably need some other kind of qualifications, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fantastic. I mean, since I dropped out of doing the 107s and the Section 333s, you know, I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to what's going on. So you're enlightening me to the BVLOS and how that's going, and you know, the reduction in the number of pilots needed. Those are, you know, that's all good news for people that want to get into this business or are in this business, or are the organizations who are thinking about bringing it on internally. I know the last company I built a program for, you know, there were probably 8 pilots at max, and we probably had, you know, 5 Mavic drones and a couple of big ones. And the big ones were so cumbersome that we never took them out and used them. It's just, you know, they were heavy, they were operated on gas, and it took a lot to get them in the air. And you certainly couldn't do a project on the other side of the country with them because you'd have to drop ship them. And it just, you know, it was a challenge. So it's neat to see some of these challenges going away for people that are in the business now. So you've explained that the drone market is still going through the roof. Life is good. There's plenty of opportunity, which is fantastic. That's good for everybody, including SimActive. So we appreciate that. So looking forward to next year, you know, we sensor software, delivery methods. I mean, what do you see, you know, kind of in a crystal ball, what might come of next year?
I think in the next year, you know, I always like talking to SimActive because, frankly, SimActive comes out with something really cool very frequently, right? They keep on that development cycle. They keep growing. You know, when you had your anniversary, this was this whole new interface and everything. But SimActive has really worked to sort of stay on that developing edge of what's possible with the processing. Mm-hmm. And I think that really puts them out in front and kind of makes them interesting. But I think that what we're going to see is, again, this concept that the pie is growing. So even let's talk specifically in the mapping and survey industry, as you know, the things that you can do with drones sort of get larger. You meet this gap here where you've had things that you could do with manned aircraft, but manned aircraft are very, very expensive. And you've had things that you could do with drones. Drones are cheap, but they could only go this far. And then there's this sort of gap here where it isn't quite worth the money to hire manned aircraft, and you don't have the resolution you need from satellite, but you know, the drone couldn't quite do it. And I think we're closing in there. And so there's actually going to be industries who see more potential use cases for mapping areas, for putting in that AI layer, for adding context. You know, they're now getting just better data. So anytime you want to develop any area of land, anytime you're looking at a piece of land to do anything with, I think it's going to be sort of the no-brainer that's where you start, and you use it from there. And I really believe that the pie is getting bigger. Everybody I talk to, when they see what can be achieved, when they actually get to look at the output, all of a sudden, those industry experts, you know, you show it to the top guy in an energy company or the top guy in an infrastructure company, and they all of a sudden start thinking, like, what could I do with this data? Yeah. What does this tell me that I really need to know for the future of my company? And that's where I think it gets really exciting. And you get the AI processing pieces and the ability to kind of coordinate these huge amounts of data into meaningful ways. That's constantly developing.
Yeah, I was going to comment that a lot of times, and it's still the case, when you bring your deliverable to your customer, and let me step back for a second. SimActive is good at what it does. It stays in its lane, and we take your imagery and we turn it into quality deliverables from which you can do more. So we're a piece of the spectrum, and a lot of time that deliverable for, say for example, we have here in Florida Power and Light, and we have a couple of things along the coal plants along the port and so forth. And in one case, their deliverable was, we just want a nice photo of the property. And then when we go to deliver that, and this is years back, when the drone pilot went to deliver that data set to the customer looked at it and said, we just had an accident. And we had contract out lawn mowing of the property. And somebody was lawn mowing near a pond. His tractor rolled over on him and he didn't make it. But they said, is there a way you can determine the slope of all of the berms on the property with this data set? And the answer was yes. In about 45 minutes, we can give you that information. And that was way more valuable to them than what they had originally purchased, and what they thought they were going to use it for.
All the time. That is happening all the time as these data sets get easier to interpret. And, you think about like what was being delivered 10 years ago versus what is being delivered now. Mm-hmm. It's so much more visual understanding of a site, a deep visual understanding of what's going on. And I think anytime you take that to somebody at the top of an organization, they immediately start coming up with more things.
Yeah. So, with new sensors, with software, with, Lidar, the higher the fidelity of the deliverable that you can produce for them, the more that can be done with it. And that is also true of AI. You still need a high quality data set from which the AI can then pull information from. So I tell people not to fear AI. It's going to do some things for us, but it's not going to do everything, and it's going to create more opportunity is what I think will happen. Looking into next year, I mean, maybe we touched on it a little bit, but where do you see the opportunities for the drone manufacturers, the sensor builders? Where are they going?
I think certainly, with just the way that the world is going and then the geopolitical pressures that are occurring right now, there is a lot of opportunity in the military space. That is a huge growth area. There is a very immediate and real need for drones, drone applications, drone data, drone mapping, right? SimActive started in the military arena, of course, and I think that is still an extremely strong area for the drone industry. But what I get excited about, and so I used to say, oh, I don't write about military. That's kind of not my thing. And I don't write about it if it's called a predator or reaper, right? You know what that does. That's not my area of expertise. However, what I've found is that there's no way to isolate the small drone activity that happens in the military space, because it's very much dual use. Almost all of it is really dual use. They will find commercial applications, and it's just a sort of slight variation of a commercial application when you put it on a battlefield. And that's everything from drone delivery to, surveying and mapping, or just seeing what's on the other side of the wall, right? So, that is very interesting. However, I really think in the long term, in addition to the military market, I think we're going to see the potential in the commercial market is greater. And that's because, as I said, the regulations and the technology are kind of coming together to a point of maturity where when you're seeing there were kind of large organizations, large oil companies and so forth who only had 100 drones. Now they are beginning, it has been 3 or 4 years that has gone through their whole risk assessment program, that has gone through their training program. As we know, working with a huge enterprise is like working with a country. It takes a long time and has to go through all of the steps. It is all about evaluation, risk mitigation, and ROI. And I think we're sort of reaching that point. So now I am writing stories about large enterprises finally scaling their organizations. And we've been hearing the word scale for, 5 years or so, but I really feel like actually 2024 might be the year.
Yeah. Well, and
actually,
like you said, it's finally starting to happen, and it's happening in organizations that have been, slowly ramping up to it. And we know that drone technology surpasses itself, every year or so. So there's probably plenty of opportunity or dollar value in there for the drone manufacturers, because whatever drone you had 2 years ago you might as well just throw it away and get another one.
Right. I mean, as you know, Eric, the joke amongst our colleagues is always like, "Oh, that is so 2022," yep. Right? It's just, It's already outdated.
Exactly. So, looking at conferences and so forth, how do you see things going? Because pretty much, we attend a lot of conferences around the world at SimActive that are mapping related, and those are just a small part of the conferences out there for drones. I've seen some specialized ones, and I've seen some larger ones look like they're going to go away, or I don't know what, from the media standpoint, from what you do, how's it look?
So I think that there's the obvious fact that COVID, yes, threw everybody back a bit. But I think that there is still a space for the few big drone shows that are out there, because I think that a lot of people still need one place to go to evaluate a lot of solutions and find partners. And that's still very much the case. You got Commercial UAV Expo and AUVSI, and those shows are still drawing a lot of people who are looking for partners and solutions, and they want to be able to evaluate a lot of different players in one spot. Also, I see kind of a little bit of a rise in manufacturers. So, for example, or I guess resellers, right? Like, so Drone Nerds had their first conference down in Florida last year. It was a great conference because they were able to have sort of all of the different models out and kind of allow people to explore points and use cases and talk to users and so forth. So I think that that was a big success also. Beyond that, I really think that what you're more seeing is kind of the drone section of the application show. So for example, I know that both Dronelife and SimActive go to Intergeo in Germany, and that now of course has a big section that is just for unmanned technology. I think the same is happening. You've got Energy Drone and Robotics Show, right? Which is very much focused on the energy industry. Energy, of course, one of the top, named by DroneAI as the top industry utilizing drone technology right now. So I do think that you see more kind of the construction shows that now have a track about drones and robotics, or the agriculture shows that have a track about drone and robotics.
Well, yeah, maybe that's because, like you said, these programs are being brought in internally. And I, for example, go to a transportation conference every year. And when we started, they may have had 2 sessions on on drones. And this year, every state was represented, and they all have programs. So, you know, if you think you're going to do work for the Department of Transportation in some state, you may or may not, because they have a program as well. And because drones are cheap, you know, they have access that you may not. You're going to see a lot of drone programs. So it makes sense that in a transportation conference, you're going to have tracks on drones. And I would assume same on the architecture side and utility side. So I guess that's good news. More conferences. You just need to know which one you want to go to.
You know, and definitely things like public safety, right? I mean, you cannot, so there's a lot of like Drone Responders, huge organization dedicated to driving, you know, the use of unmanned tools in the public safety arena. And that's a case where you really can't take a drone pilot and make them a cop. You know, you have to kind of take the cop and make them the drone pilot.
That's very true. But to that, and even more towards, you know, your world, where do you see, as far as, you know, where are these companies marketing? How are they marketing? And I ask the question because, like, for example, I say email's dead. I almost never read an email anymore. Just, it's old stuff, you know, send me a text or something. And when we talk about marketing on social media, it's like, what platform? What platform is anybody paying attention to these days? You know, and you know, print media, other stuff. What are your thoughts there?
So I think we're seeing actually, that's a very interesting question, because this is something I, of course, think deeply about. We have a online platform. We have a daily newsletter email, right? Goes to more than 21,000 people every day. So I don't know, you know, somebody reads it, I hope. We have Facebook, we have X, we have all those things, and YouTube and so forth. But I think what it really comes down to is this concept of sales, you know, 2.0, or I don't know, maybe we're at a higher number now. But back in the day when I started my career in sales, you know, you really controlled the process. So you would be all on the phone call and somebody would ask for references and you deliver references, and someone would ask for data and you deliver data, and you controlled the process. But you no longer have that control. So if you're a salesperson or you're trying to market your company, you have to understand that your prospect has already Googled you. They already have read all of the data and the reviews and the information that's out there for you. And so that's one thing, is that you just need to be somewhere so that when they're Googling you, they are finding positive and useful information about your product. Yeah. So you cannot not generate any media. You can't just say, we're engineers, we don't do that. It doesn't work, because then the only thing somebody's going to find when they Google you is a crap website that they can't do anything on, and it looks like you have no users. Yep. So you may be losing prospects that you didn't even know existed. So you have to be somewhere. And that's either, you know, you're reaching out to somebody like me and I'm writing about you, or you're generating your own stuff, or whatever, but you got to be somewhere out where they can find you. And I think that the second thing that's really important to note is that now, so I read research reports all the time. You know, I get sent tons of them, several a week. I read through them. I discard the ones that I think are sort of based on guesses, and I glean little bits from the ones that are based on fact. But if you look at, again, Drone Industry Insights, one of my favorites, the things that they use to estimate, you know, kind of who's the biggest in whatever, drone service providers, drone manufacturers, whatever. At this point, kind of social mention is one of the factors. You could have a great product, but if nobody is talking about you, you are not necessarily going to show up on these industry reports, which can really help raise your profile. So, I think that they're careful to make sure that somebody's not a blowfish, that they have like tons and tons of social mentions and no product. You need to have both. But the fact of the matter is that regardless of where you choose to focus your efforts, and I think that can be automated. If you have a website, you can immediately distribute to X and Facebook and wherever. I think you really need to be very aware that you have to be somewhere. You have to be searchable. You have to have useful information. You have to have those case studies findable somewhere. You have to have customer quotes. You have to provide some information, because often if you think about buyer behavior, they're going out, they're trying to find several choices. They're going to put them in some kind of evaluation format, and they're going to evaluate against their criteria. You haven't had the opportunity to talk to them yet. You haven't had the opportunity to make your case, and you're not going to get that opportunity unless they can fill in enough of those columns based on what they find online.
Yeah, that's really important for people to understand, is that even if you're, like you said, engineers are notorious for this. They still use the yellow pages, I think. So, bringing in and understanding what your marketing goals are and how those affect your business is, that's why we come to someone like you for help, because, one, you can't do it all yourself. And two, you might have, you're not the person that is educated in that. You're not the person who understands SEOs and, how to get your website up to a point where people can see it versus your competitors or what have you. And all of that drives your success on the back end as well. So,
yeah. And at the end of the day, I think people tend too much to think of marketing and sales as two separate things. And of course they're not. There's no point to marketing if it doesn't end up with the sales, right? That is work. I'm clear on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're clear on that, right?
Yep.
So if you are working on sales, you need to be working on marketing. That is how you're getting those leads, whether you know it or not. So whether it's tracking it or not, and whether it's feeding it through some HubSpot or something like that, whether you know it or not, if your prospects can't find you and find enough information about you to fill in enough parts of that grid, you don't make the cut for evaluation.
Yeah.
So they aren't calling you. You're not getting the chance to make your case.
Yeah. Well, we'll close with that, but thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights. Again, myself included, there are a lot of us out here that work in the drone space, and we don't necessarily have that overarching knowledge of the market that you do, and I appreciate your joining us and discussing those things.
Always my pleasure.
Again, I'd like to thank our guest, Miriam McNabb, Editor-in-Chief of Dronelife. Thanks. I'd also like to thank you for joining us as well. A reminder, this interview, our webinars, and our podcasts are all available on the SimActive website under the Learning tab. Thanks again. Until next time.